The case involving Middletown native Nathan Carman will be featured on 2020 tonight. Carman was accused of killing his mother off the coast of Rhode Island in 2016. Linda Carman disappeared on a fishing trip with her son and is presumed dead. Nathan Carman was charged with murder but killed himself in jail before his trial. Joining me is 2020 co-anchor Deborah Roberts to talk about the new developments in this case. Deborah, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, always a pleasure. And yes, as you sort of cite all of these twists and turns in this case, it is something that fascinated us just as much as it has people at home for some time now. From the moment that Nathan Carman was rescued, as it were, at sea in that life raft, after his boat sank and there were questions about what happened to his mom, of course, we, like everybody, began to pay close attention to this story. And initially, of course, it seemed to be a miracle at sea. But when investigators began to dig a little deeper, there were big questions about whether this was a miracle or a murder. And of course, this is the kind of story that we are always fascinated to find out about. So tonight on 2020, we dig deeply into this. You're going to hear from investigators about why they began to suspect Nathan's tale of being lost at sea and having no idea of what had happened to his mom. You'll hear from that lawyer for the boat company who really began to look at some things that didn't add up and set off what would become a criminal investigation that then stretched back further into Nathan's life. And also just hear more about how this is a very wealthy family. When you talk about wealth and you talk about inheritances and you talk about family tragedy, I mean, it is sort of all those things of a TV drama. And we will take you inside that tonight. And we'll also take you out on the high seas. I jumped on a boat with my crew to go out to see where this actually happened near Block Island and how it could have possibly happened and why there were questions. It's a really fascinating 2020 that we bring you some never before seen clips, and also you get to hear from Nathan himself because ABC was the only one who ever interviewed him all those years.
Deborah, what new revelations are coming to the surface? What did you find?
Well, what we found was this was a much more complicated story than you knew. I mean, we knew that there were, as you said, these tragedies that had befallen his mother and his grandfather, but how and why and what did investigators know? You're going to hear from them about what frustrated them along the way in this case. And also, too, when you look at where the case stands now, even after all of this has happened, and as you said, what happened to Nathan, where does the case stand now? You may be a little bit surprised to find out how the court had to finally make a decision on what possibly maybe happened there. So we're going to bring you up to speed on all of that, but also revisit a fascinating story with video and never before heard interrogation tapes, things that people haven't heard before to have a better understanding of the Nathan Carman story.
And finally, Deborah, tonight's 2020 episode is called Family Lies. What lies do police think Carman told them?
Well, they think there were a lot, and he was a very complicated young man. I mean, you may know that he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, but he was a very smart, astute young man who had actually worked with his grandfather. So you'll hear, how when they were looking at the murder weapon in the very first case of the grandfather being killed, you'll hear what Nathan said versus what they discovered later. In his own words, you'll hear how he was able to manipulate, really, police, even represented himself in court at one point. This was a very smart young man, and you'll hear more about how he was able to sort of keep investigators off his trail, or certainly they weren't able to make an arrest for a very long time. And you'll learn why tonight on 2020.
Deborah, thanks so much for joining us and enlightening us about what you've learned in the Nathan Carman case.
Of course.
And coming up on Tuesday on Nyberg, you'll hear from New York Times bestselling author Casey Sherman, who will be featured in this evening's 2020 report. I'll talk to him about what he has uncovered in this case in his book called Blood in the Water.